Hello, and welcome to episode 90 of TBR, the To Be Read podcast, where we talk about the books we love and the topics that interest us. As always, I'm Patrick Stemp, and I have with me here Michael Ronn. How are you, Michael?
Great, Patrick. How are you?
Good. And John L. Monk with the rose in his mouth, so I don't know if he can talk right now, but how you doing, John?
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
Good. Was that like leftover from Valentine's Day?
Yes, I'm not that romantic, am I?
Yeah.
So,
we have a special guest on the show, Patrick's cat.
yeah,
No.
as always, there's always somebody there.
My wife loves that cat.
Oh yeah, he's
Yeah.
one of a few who like to get on camera. So tonight we're going to be talking about our favorite fictional romances, and if it gets R-rated behind me with the cat, you'll have to let me know and I'll move him.
Duly noted. Will do.
But before we get to our topic, we will do our roundtable and talk about what we've been reading for the week. And I guess I'll go first since I never go first. I always pick on John. So this week I read Calamity by Brandon Sanderson, which is the third and final book, I would think, in the Reckoners series. So this is a series that I thoroughly enjoyed the first two books and was very disappointed in the third. I enjoyed the read. The ride was fun, the journey was interesting, and then it all kind of falls apart at the end. And it's, so for anyone who's read the first book and the second book and wants to read the third, I mean, I would suggest, I mean, it's a series. It's not bad enough that you don't want to read it, but I personally found it, the ending kind of comes out of nowhere, and it's not unexpected, but it is kind of a letdown. It's one of those kind of things where, trying to think of an example. Well, I have never read it, but I've heard it has been spoiled for me. So have you guys read Under the Dome by Stephen King?
No.
I saw the show a little bit.
So I mean, sorry for anyone who hasn't read that book, but it's been out for a few years, so I think we should be free to spoil it. I mean, what it boils down to, as far as I know, is, there's all these crazy things going on in this city. There's a big, invisible dome that's been placed around, and at the very end you find out, it was aliens that did it, out of nowhere. This is kind of the same sort of thing. I think there were probably better explanations that he could have used and kind of set up throughout the story. And had he gone in this direction, for anyone who, I see it's hard, I don't want to ruin it for anybody because it is a pretty new book. The ending just really kind of was a real downer for me. And if you read the reviews, you'll see a lot of people, anyone who has a problem with the book and is giving it negative reviews, it's for the same reason. It's the ending that really just doesn't work here. But if you enjoyed the first two books, it's a good read. It's well written. It's just, don't expect too much out of the ending. And that's it for me.
I still want to read the first two books.
Me too.
Yeah, it's a good series. It's just, unfortunately, it doesn't end well. So what about, let's see, Michael, what have you been reading?
I finished my first John Grisham novel this past week, and that is Grey Mountain. I think I talked about it briefly last week, but I read it as part of a course that I'm taking with Dean Leslie Smith on character development, and he had recommended the book as a clear example of being able to see character development on the page. And it's pretty interesting. It takes place in 2008, at the very beginning of the Great Recession, just as Lehman Brothers collapse happens. And the heroine is a Ivy League graduate. I mean, she's probably maybe a year or two out of college. She works for the biggest law firm in the world, and all of a sudden, because of the financial meltdown, the law firm has to start letting people go, and she gets the axe. And she has to figure out what she's going to do with her life. And it's pretty interesting. She ends up in a small town in Virginia, and she ends up taking on cases basically to go against coal companies, because big coal is kind of the king down there, especially in Appalachia and the mountains. And it's kind of just the story of her exploration. It's a story, in many ways, it's probably the preachiest novel I've ever read. Like, it's totally anti-big coal, liberal kind of a book. But I kind of enjoyed that. I enjoyed the perspective. I learned some things about coal companies I didn't know. But this is probably the most interesting book I've read because I probably got to about the 75% mark, and there was still no plot. Like, it's funny how nothing happens in this.
Sounds like the John Grisham I know. Yeah.
Nothing happens in this book, but I love the character. It was so weird. Like, we always talk about how, well, you have to have a character, you have to have plot, and I just remember just really enjoy being along for the ride, and I loved getting inside her head. I loved the small town she was in. It felt really good. The story, and then when there was a story at around the 75% mark, I just kind of fell off the wagon. I just didn't care, So maybe he's better when he's not writing plot. I don't know.
John Grisham is maybe the I don't know what the word is, but he's written one of the only 2 movies that I ever walked out on, I think, which was The Pelican Brief. Good God, that turned me off, John Grisham. The Firm, I couldn't stand. I hated The Firm. And I think the only other movie I've ever walked out on was Wild Wild West with
Will Smith and
Will Smith, yeah. And
Kevin Kline. You walked out on that? It wasn't that bad of a movie, but
yeah, it was. Anyway,
actually, I'll get into that discussion. But yeah, I finished Grey Mountain. That was a great book. I definitely will be reading more of Grisham. I like his style. I love his writing style. So that was enjoyable. The next author I'd like to get to at some point this year, Stephen King. Hopefully, I'll get to him. I know I keep saying that, but and then I also just picked up a book called Closest to the Fire, and it let me see what the subtitle is: A Writer's Guide to Law and Lawyers. So I'm on this kick now where I kind of want to know more about different elements of the world, like police, procedurals, lawyers, guns, karate. So that'll be interesting to read. So.
Okay.
That's pretty much my week. The Grisham book pretty much ate up the whole week. That was a pretty big one.
Mm-hmm.
How about you, John?
I just want to say that if you ever want to know about karate, just come to me, because I grew up watching kung fu movies that can show you how to be really scary.
Nice. I don't know karate, but I know crazy.
That's got to be from something.
James Brown.
Okay. By the way, the Magic of Recluse is another book that doesn't seem to have a plot, and yet you just love every inch of it as you're kind of reading along. He spends the whole book making wooden furniture, and you love it. You just love it, and it's a magical book kind of thing. So the reason why I told you that is because I also don't have much to say. I was reading the Zodiac Convergence, Zodiac Legacy Convergence in the last week. And
are you enjoying that book, John?
Well,
well, we're going to be talking about that next week. So.
Yeah. You know what? I mean, there are things about it that I like quite a bit, but I guess overall it's probably not for me. But maybe this is not the time to talk about it. So. But yeah, I didn't want to go into it, so that's why I told you guys about the Magic of Recluse and the karate. That's it. That's all I got.
Okay.
Yeah.
With that, we will roll through our topic of the week, and I think it was Michael's topic to talk about fictional romances. So not necessarily romance, the genre, but just sort of the general romance in the city. So romances has happening in general fiction. I have my list. I'm sure you guys have yours.
Indeed.
So do you want to go first, Michael?
Sure. First one I had on my list. I feel like I always keep bringing this up, but it's just such a great story and such a great example of. It's not. I guess we wouldn't call it a romance, but it's definitely cute, makes you feel good, and that's Bone, right? Mm-hmm. Between Phony Bone and Thorn. I
was worried you were going to take one of my other ones when you said you I'm sure you have this on your list too, but go on, Bone.
I probably do. Yeah, so I just love that little romance between Bone and Thorn, and it was just so cute how he would write her the poems and the love letters, and how she didn't necessarily reciprocate that back, and it was just pulled on your heartstrings, The second one I had on my list was Jane Eyre, and that is Jane Eyre and Rochester. So it's a classical, classic literature, one of the great classic books, but definitely a very tragic sort of romance, but I enjoyed that as well. So what about you guys?
Well, if you want to talk about tragic romances, and since you went literary, I'm going the opposite direction, and I'm going to say Marty McFly and his mother in Back to the Future.
Oh.
Oh, that's cold.
No,
That's just creepy.
she falls for her own son in the 1950s. Talk about unrequited love. But I had that one on my list just for fun, and since you pulled out the Jane Eyre, I had to throw that in there. But the
Have
other
you
one
guys
that
seen that Family Guy episode, The Black to the Future?
no, I don't think so.
That's probably one of my favorite Family Guy bits. But anyway, go ahead.
I'm going to throw this one out before you have a chance to, because I'm sure it's on your list, and that is Saga.
Oh yeah.
So we've mentioned this one too as well in the past. It's a graphic novel, and the two main protagonists. There are a ton of characters in this story, but the two primary protagonists are a man and a woman who are fighting on opposite sides of a war. They're from different planets. They're different species, really. And everything. The story kind of kicks off when these two fall in love, and he's a prisoner of war, and she's one of the guards who helps him escape, and she's pregnant, and basically everyone from both sides is trying to track these people down, and it's a really cool story. And I think, Michael, you saw book 6 or volume 6 has finally just come out for pre-order. I think it's coming out in June or July, which is a little sooner than I thought it would, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, usually it's in fall. So yeah, that'll be fun. I can't wait.
What about you, John?
I gotta read Saga after I finish The Sandman.
Mm-hmm.
My little, I had a list. There's one of the greatest books I've ever read as far as science fiction is concerned, and it just happens to be an absolutely stunning kind of science fiction-y romance. Would be Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Charles Sheffield. Have you ever read it?
No.
All right. So Charles Sheffield is a great science fiction author, or used to be. He's dead now. And he wrote a book called Tomorrow and Tomorrow, and it's about a guy whose wife has cancer or some terrible sickness, and she dies, and he freezes her body. Okay, and then he doesn't wait for himself to die. He goes and gets it done to him. He gets himself frozen. I don't know how he got around the laws. I forget. But he gets himself frozen, and then he wakes up 300 years later, and they still can't fix her. And he screws up something. It's kind of a plot twist. It's not really a reveal. And so they could have probably done it in another 100 years, but because he messed something up, she's not recoverable. And like 500 years go by, he freezes himself again, and he does it again, thousands of years go by, millions, and he's still not able to kind of bring her back. And there's all kinds of amazing stuff that happens as he goes to the future, galactic wars with clone armies of himself all sort of fighting to kind of eventually bring her back because they all love her too, somehow that works out. But and it goes on for millions and hundreds of millions and even billions of years, and then there's this absolutely amazing ending, which I absolutely loved, and it's just so cool. I mean, talk about romance, right? Following someone through eons and millenniums and all that, all the funny words,
It's an interesting way to get to throw somebody through the future like that. And now I'm racking my brains because it reminded me of another science fiction story. And
I'm thinking of something too.
It's about a group of astronauts who are on a spaceship that is constantly accelerating at a constant speed, and something happens and they can't stop. They can't slow down, and they basically just end up going and going and going through to the end of time, basically, until time sort of wraps back on itself and starts all over again. Sort of they go through a big bang, and it's very old. And I wish I could remember what the heck it's called, but it kind of reminded me of that. That's another good way of then showing people going through eons through time.
Yeah. That's a good one. What's the name of that book again?
It's called Tomorrow and Tomorrow. And like I said, Charles Sheffield is sort of a big deal in science fiction, up there with like Frederick Pohl and Heinlein and all those guys. Although you might not, obviously, I don't think you've ever heard of him. But I actually met him. I went to a science fiction convention, shook his hand, and it was just cool. He signed my copy,
Mm-hmm.
Cool. That also reminded me a little bit too of The Man Who Folded Himself, which I
Heard of
think
that.
well, you've read it, Michael, right?
I have it. I haven't read it yet.
Okay, that's a great time travel story as well. What else do you have on your list? Either one. Either one.
Go ahead, Mike. I've talked.
Let's see. I had. Try to pick which one I want. Cut the side. Okay. I had. This is a video game reference, but I had Tidus and Yuna from Final Fantasy X. Great
It's
love
2 weeks in
story.
a row you brought up Final Fantasy X.
Hey, it's one of my favorite video games of all time. I can't help it. But that is, I mean, I don't know how you can't love that romance. But yeah, just great characters. Like it's like a guy from the future ends up falling in love with this girl who's a summoner who's going to sacrifice herself, and it's just a great story. Another romance I had was Harry Potter. Even though there's really no, I don't know, I didn't really buy into the whole romance between Harry and Ginny. Like, I just thought that was stupid.
No, you mean
like,
oh yeah, that was Harry and Ginny. Was that?
Yeah,
Isn't
Harry and
there
Ginny.
like a whole ton of like fan fiction that rewrites all of that?
Yeah, rewrites it and has Harry fall in love with Hermione, and I still think Harry and Hermione should have been the romantic couple.
I think Ron and Hermione were great, but
they
Ginny
were,
and,
but yeah,
I
Ginny
like
was
Harry
more
with Luna.
I think it allowed J.K. to include the romance aspect of the story without subverting or distracting Harry Potter. Because you would expect in a story like that there'd be a love interest. It's kind of I mean, it's Star Wars, right? I mean, you expect the romance to be between Luke and Leia, but that would sort of take away from that story. So oops, now she's with Han and their brother and sister, and it's the same thing. I think it allows them to keep the romance in the story without distracting the main character.
True.
So I can understand why she would do it.
Yeah, no, I totally understand it, and I guess at the end it made sense, but yeah, I still liked Harry. And
you were
Hermione
rooting
better.
for Harry, hey?
I was rooting for Hermione. I mean, there are a lot of people that crap on Ron Weasley. I actually happen to like Ron as a character, but
I like him as an actor too. Is it Rupert Grint? He was was great in a movie with Bill Nighy, where he's Bill Nighy is an assassin who finds that he can't take out his target because she's too basically just young and cute and innocent, and so he kind of runs away with her, and Rupert Grint gets involved with them, and I can't remember what that one was called, but if you like British sort of funny movies, just look up Rupert Grint and Bill Nighy and you'll see it.
Cool.
So speaking of movies that were also books, I have The Princess Bride on my list, of course.
Nice.
Weasley and Princess Buttercup, of course, that's the greatest love story ever told. And, what else can you say? It's just an amazing book, which I don't think either of you have read the book.
No.
I haven't read the book. I've seen the movie.
The book is not what you would expect, but it's great. And, of course, the movie is fantastic.
Cool.
Who's next? I'm going all books. I'm going all like movies and TV shows with my list today.
Okay.
Excuse me.
I want to get in that I thought Luna Lovegood and Harry would have been a really, really great, interesting match, but whatever. They didn't ask me, so. Replay by Ken Grimwood. You guys read it?
Nope.
No.
Oh, okay. It's another time travel-y type romance. All right. So, what it is this guy. He turns like 85, has a heart attack, wakes up in his young body, driving down the roads with his friends back in the 50s or whatever, and they're in the car with the top down, all that kind of stuff, and he's just back in the past. He is in his body, and he's aware of this, and he can do what he wants and change history, and he does a lot, and take advantage of Powerball winnings and things like that. And he meets this girl who's having it happen to him too. So they keep on sort of spending their lives together and then dying and spending their lives together and dying and spending their lives together and dying. And it's not a love story. There's just love in it. There's other stuff going on too. You know, like stopping communism or whatever horrible thing was going on, like some war or some terrorist attack, which leads to other things horribly happening. You know, don't mess with the future kind of stuff. So that was really good. And as far as movies are concerned, I'm actually torn between French Kiss and Groundhog Day. Groundhog Day, another time travel story. Where's my mind going? You know, you know, it's like that's the only thing I find romantic, I guess, is going back in time.
Bill Murray's like the ultimate stalker in that movie.
But it's perfect. Yeah. He has to relive the day again and again until he gets it right, and you know, that kind of thing.
So let me ask you this: Bill Murray in Groundhog Day, or Bill Murray's romance in Ghostbusters? What do you prefer? Bill Murray and Sigourney Weaver? No.
That's a really tough one. You know?
Sigourney Weaver over.
Who was it in Groundhog Day?
I wanted to say Mary Stuart Masterson, but is that right? I don't know that. No,
I don't remember. I don't remember.
No, I had Mary Stuart Masterson, her name in my head for another reason that I'll bring up in a minute. But yeah, I'll take Sigourney Weaver any day. But I would say Groundhog Day as far as the romance goes.
Yeah.
I don't know. The Keymaster and the Gatekeeper sort of, you know, I get all misty when I...
That's Rick Moranis.
Yeah.
I get all misty.
Well, I was thinking of Lost in Translation, too. That was an interesting romance.
That was weird.
Quasi-romance. Yeah. Let's see.
So while we're talking movies there, I'm gonna throw out Forrest Gump.
Okay.
And his love for Jenny. That is a movie that gets you every time at the very, very end.
That's a good movie.
They were like peas and carrots.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Some of my favorite foods. So.
Andy McDowell, is that it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's who was in Groundhog
So I'll
Day.
mention then why I said Mary Stuart Masterson, because one of my all-time favorite movies when I was, 13 or so, 1987 was the year, was Some Kind of Wonderful with Eric Stoltz, who is still one of my favorite actors, Mary Stuart Masterson, and Leah Thompson. And that was one of those typical, now it's the typical boy thinks he's in love with one girl, but really he's in love with the other girl, the tomboy or whatever. That's going back a ways. You guys remember watching that movie ever?
I never saw it, but I've heard of it.
No.
It's a great old movie. I don't know if it would hold up today. Probably not. Most of those movies don't. But it was one that I watched over and over again back in the day.
Well, I'll move the needle forward about 10 years and say Boy Meets World, Corey and Topanga. Did you guys ever watch that?
I
talk about a romantic arc like that, just over like 10 seasons.
Yeah, I was aware of that show when it was on, but I never really watched it. I think I was coming off the Wonder Years. That show came first, of course, and that
was a great show too, though.
Yeah, I think I was maybe getting a little too old for those shows when Boy Meets World kind of hit the airwaves.
I got
one show. Yeah.
Sherlock Holmes and Irene Adler, and I'm not talking about the movie per se.
I was going to say Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson.
Well, they weren't really into each other.
Bromance.
I was going to get into the bromance. Totally get into the bromances. There's nothing wrong with a good bromance, and I'll get to the best bromance ever, or maybe two of them as we go along. So go ahead.
22 Jump Street, if you want to talk about the greatest bromance ever.
22 Jump Street. Okay.
Oh, no, I've seen that show.
Seen the first one. I haven't seen the second one. No, he's talking about the second movie.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the show in the 90s.
No,
21 Jump Street.
Yeah, that's
the sequels. It's 22 Jump Street, really?
Well, there's a movie called 21 Jump Street.
Right.
It's a spoof off the show, and they made a sequel called 22 Jump Street, and it's a lot better than 21 Jump Street. It's like it's like they got really, really inspired and they made a great movie. And people aren't likely to see it because it's one of those movies that you think, oh, you're just milking it, you're kicking the dead animal, whatever. You know, I'm not going to see it. It's going to first one sucked. This one's going to be worse. Quite the opposite. It's like Lethal Weapon 4 was like the best in the series, I thought.
Okay.
So there's a big old bromance going on in there, and but Irene Adler and Sherlock, Sherlock is like this mental machine, this mentat kind of person, and Watson's always trying to like forge that bromance with him and kind of get close to him. He's always being shut down and kept at bay by the superior intellect and treated like crap all the time, but he keeps coming back, like that codependent relationship. But Irene Adler got to him. He got through that armor by basically outsmarting him, which is the real way to get to his heart, and that's why I like it.
Yeah. Okay.
I had two from comedians, because we're talking about TV as well. And if you guys see the movie Top 5, Chris Rock, came out a couple years ago.
I don't think so.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, I would not put Chris Rock and romance in the same sentence, but this movie was awesome. Like, just a great romance. Like, he's this actor who's kind of washed out, and he's getting interviewed by this reporter, and they kind of fall in love. And I would definitely recommend that movie. And then I would also say Louis C.K. in the show Louis in FX. Have you guys seen that?
Yep, that's wonderful.
There's not really one romance per se, but he falls in love with a couple of different women throughout the course of the show, and yeah, just great writing.
A lot of romance going on in it. There's a lot of stuff about relationships and the human condition and everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Single dad, And
sometimes
a couple times he finds the girl that he thinks is the one, and for whatever reason she disappears.
And romance can be a problem because one of my favorite romances turned, which was if you've ever watched Castle. So it was Castle and Beckett. He's a writer. She's a cop, and he comes in as basically to get some ideas for his books. But that was a show that for me was ruined once they resolved the romance, because it was funny and fun and neat for 5 seasons or so. And it moved away from being about the mystery and the drama with the romance kind of being just a part of the show. It turned into being about that romance. So when they resolved it and those two characters got together, the show just fell apart for me. Like it ceased to be interesting anymore. All the tension was gone.
Well, it's like there's no tension anymore. Yeah, it just
and
takes out all the surprise.
Whereas a show that did that right, I think very right. Another romance, good favorite of mine would be Sam and Diane on Cheers. And when those two got together, the sparks still flied. And they those wonderful moments they always had of going from not being able to stand each other to not being able to stay away from each other.
Love it.
Yeah.
And it worked. She's a good actress. He's a good actor. I just in the last year or two rewatched Cheers, and I mean I got to the part with that other woman. I just want to go back and rewatch all the Sam and Diane stuff again. I loved it.
It's a great show. I haven't seen Cheers in years.
No. By the way, because he said Chris Rock, it immediately made me think of a really good. You guys are gonna laugh. There's a movie that got me a little bit misty. Casual Sex with Andrew Dice Clay. He had a secondary part in that movie, and I thought I was just rooting for him in the end. He was the big bumbling jerk who, got the girl. That did it for me. It probably
Andrew Dice Clay, really?
Yes, he pulled it off. It's called
Were you a big Ford Fairlane fan?
No, I didn't. I don't like Andrew Dice Clay. I think his comedy sucks. I don't watch him, but I loved him in this movie because it worked out.
Yeah, that's what I like Chris Rock, but like. He plays a very serious. It's a very serious romantic comedy. So yeah, I'll have to check that out, perhaps.
I'm running out on my list. I can bang off the last couple, and I'll end with my favorite. So second favorite, I had Futurama, the romance between Fry and Leela. which was an ongoing thing through the entire series. And when they did resolve it, it was actually quite sweet. And maybe the bromance between Fry and Bender. However, my top favorite bromance has got to be Turk and JD in Scrubs. Did you guys ever watch Scrubs?
Yeah,
That was
a great show.
For my money, that was one of the funniest shows at its time. Now, but man, those two just killed me every week. The friendship, they went to med school together, and they lived together, and they dated together, and they, that was just such a funny show, and those two guys were amazing as best friends and buddies.
Yeah, well, that makes me think of New Girl. You guys have seen that? Where it's not really a bromance, but it's just a friend-mance. It's like 4 friends living in a hotel, or not a hotel, but a loft. I like that show, but if you guys haven't seen it, no point discussing it.
What about
You're
the
gonna make
ants?
judgments.
What about the ants in the movie Ants? The guy and the girl. It was like an ants-mance.
Ant-mance.
They were just making up words.
An arthropod romance.
I'm all out, by the way. I got nothing.
You're all
I'm
out?
out
Okay.
too.
Oh, you're out. We're all out. Okay.
Yeah, we're all out. Empty.
Okay, so if anybody listening wants to throw their favorite romances in the comments, that's cool. And next week we're doing our second sort of Book of the Month club, and this month we have been reading The Zodiac Legacy: Convergence by Stanley and Stuart Moore. And this book was recommended to us by Amber, one of our listeners, one of our viewers. And I'm going to, fair warning here, because this is a book that is not really working for us. And we don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, and we're not, we've been talking about, Amber was good enough to recommend this book to us, and but just because it's not our favorite book in the world, we still want to talk about it, and we're not going to trash it. Of course, we don't do that here, but it's a good opportunity for us to kind of talk about. We've said this before. Just because you don't enjoy something doesn't mean it doesn't have value to someone else, and so we're going to talk a little bit about the things that maybe didn't work for us, some of the things that did, and what could have maybe made it better. And so that should be an interesting discussion for sure. So With that, we will see you next week, and have a great weekend reading, and we will talk to you all soon.
See you.
Take care.